Okay, our next video is long-range optical sight parameters. This particular video might be the most important of all our equipment selection videos that we're going to put out. In order to get an optical sight set up that's going to be effective for long-range and extreme-range shooting, we're going to have to make sure that all the features we have in our optic are appropriate for our application. Now, I know that over the course of our last few videos, we've been getting kind of technical on some of these things, and this particular video may get a bit technical as well. But you guys are all pretty smart. I'm sure you can handle it. I'm going to treat you as adults here, so I'm not going to dumb this down at all for anybody. You'll all be able to keep up, no problem. If you made it this far into the series, you're going to be okay. But we're going to discuss different sight features. What we're talking about is we're going to discuss turrets on rifle scopes. We're going to talk more in detail about the tracking of the turrets, the range of adjustment, the units per revolution of different kinds of turret setups. We're going to also talk in detail about tube diameter and magnification. We're going to go into detail into a fixed versus variable magnification. We're going to talk about magnification power values. How much magnification will be needed for your mission criteria. We're going to talk about how magnification plays out in light transmission and optical clarity and exit pupil diameter. We're also going to discuss reticles. That's the crosshair types we got going on in the scope here. We're going to talk about mil dots, mil scales. We already talked a little bit about BDCs and SVDs, but we're going to talk about reticles that are the most appropriate for our purposes. Then we're going to go into focal planes, first versus second focal plane. That's one crucial thing you don't want to be sleeping for that part. So hopefully I'll get your attention before we get there. Objective lenses, we're going to talk about that, exit pupil diameter and some things. We're going to talk about eye relief. So that's our optical sight parameters. This is the primary criteria for choosing your long range and your extreme range optics. Again, if you missed any of the preceding videos, you may very well want to catch up on some of those, or you might not know what we're aiming to get at here. And after we're done with our optical sight parameters, I don't know if it'll be probably on the next video, we will get into sight quality. That's a whole nother category, and we're going to talk about the quality of different brands and do some comparisons. And after all is said and done, we will do some long-range sight selection and review. We will help you find a particular brand and model that'll work for your applications, and we'll go over some of the real common setups and get you all situated here. So, long-range optical sight parameters. Lots of different scopes have lots of different setups, and there's like infinite combinations of features that you could have in these scopes. If you were to use statistics to figure out how many different possible setups there'd be, it'd be in the thousands and thousands and thousands of different setups. So what we're going to do is just break it up into digestible pieces. We're going to talk about each feature. So as we go along, it might be wise to go out and get a notebook or something if you're considering what optic to purchase here for your long-range setup, and write down each one of these different parameters. And as we discuss them, we'll be talking about how different features will be good for different purposes. So you got to keep in mind your area of operations and your specific mission parameters. Are you hunting? Are you target shooting? Are you going to be operating in a less than friendly conditions? And you're going to want to be writing down which parameters are going to be desirable in each different feature class. So when we talk about turrets, I'll be talking about lots of different turret types. You're going to want to write down which one you're going to be looking for. And after we're all done with going over these optical parameters, you will be able to look at your list and you will know exactly which features you're going to want on your sight, your optical sight. And you will be able to then really, really narrow down which scope you're looking for. And then it'll just be a question of quality and how much you can afford. And that's the scientific way to break this down. So, the most important of our long-range sight features that we can discuss here in this video series is going to be the turrets. Now, here's a little picture that I drew on paint the other day. It was pretty good, actually, I'd say. You know, I think I did a pretty good job drawing this scope here. But this is just going from kind of memory. This is what's basically inside of a typical rifle scope. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I neglected to draw in here, but this is the primary stuff we're going to be talking about. So basically, how the turret in your scope works is you're going to have two turrets, one for elevation, one for windage. Obviously, the elevation turret's going to allow your up and down movement, and your windage turret's going to go, lateral movement. And it's pretty simple in its design. You basically got a giant screw that's threaded, and you turn the turret in or out, and it presses against what's called an erector tube assembly. And there's a small tube within the scope that's kind of a separate piece inside there, and it has different lenses in there. On some of your variable power scopes, that's where some of your erector lenses are going to be set up, that you adjust the spacing between the different lenses to get your different magnifications. But your erector tube is what actually physically moves on the inside of the scope. So when you turn in your turrets, they'll press against that erector tube, moving it up and down or left and right. And there's a counter spring on the bottom side. They're usually a big flat spring. I don't know what I was trying to draw here. I just drew, that's the spring on the bottom there. I don't know if you can tell what that is. But there's a spring that counteracts the turrets to keep everything steady. When we're talking about our long-range optical sights here, this is the part that is going to have really, really good design and quality if you're going to have any luck of hitting anything at all. This is what we call tracking. So basically, you're going to want a rifle scope in which when you turn those turrets, you're going to have 100% reliable tracking. That's referring to how much it moves, in relation to how much is marked on the outside of the turret. If your turret's marked in minutes of angle, and you turn it 4 minutes of angle at the turret, you want your actual angular unit of adjustment to be 4 minutes of angle. Not 3.9, not 3.98, but exactly 4 every single time. Because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be shooting at various ranges. You're going to be dialing back and forth. You're going to be making small adjustments. You're going to be dialing all the time on these things. And if you have an accumulation of slop in those turrets, like if once in a while you turn it, it was off by 1/10 of a mil or just 1/4 of a minute, no big deal. After a while, it's going to add up, and it's going to cause you to lose your zero. And that's not going to be good at all, because a tiny bit of angular measurement at close range may be nothing, but at long range, it's going to be amplified, huge. One click off at close range might not be hardly even measurable, but at very long range, it's going to be quite a large amount. So you're going to want your tracking to be 100% reliable. And when we get into our video talking about quality, we will talk about how different brands and different models of scopes relate to this topic in quality. Tracking is the number one criteria that you're looking for when you're talking about optical quality. A lot of guys will pick up a scope off the shelf and say, man, that thing is clear. That must be a good scope. But in reality, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about glass, glass is not the criteria for measuring optical quality anymore. The manufacturing technology has increased to the point to where it's very hard to distinguish between even really crappy glass and pretty good glass, because even the crappy stuff has caught up. It's light years ahead of what it was 10 years ago. So even bad glass is going to be pretty good. And even an expert's going to have a hard time distinguishing in a blind test, So turret quality and the tracking of your turrets, that's the quality we're going to primarily be looking for. And there are different kinds of turrets. You're going to have low-profile turrets, like you're going to find on your sporting optics, like we discussed earlier. That's like your deer hunting scope, where you unscrew a cap, a turret cap, and then underneath there you're going to have a real small little thing. You need a screwdriver, or maybe you got to press against it with your thumb, or you get a coin and you turn that turret. That's a low-profile sporting turret. That is not really going to work very well. Not only because it's hard to grab onto, but because those are not really designed for reliable tracking. You can kind of walk them in there, like on a deer rifle, but the idea on a sporting optic is once you get that thing kind of zeroed, you slam it around a few times, you hit the where the erector assembly is with the screwdriver head a few times, and you wiggle it to make sure it's settled in. And then, okay, once you're zeroed, you don't ever touch it again, because if you turn 4 clicks, it's probably not going to move 4 clicks. It might move 2 or 1 or whatever. And then after a few shots, it moves 6 clicks. So that's what we do not want to have happen. Your target style turrets, this is something you got to be leery of when you're shopping for optics, because a lot of scopes that are marketed as tactical scopes or long-range scopes or target scopes are really sporting scopes with the same internal mechanics on the turrets as a sporting scope, but they have a big target knob sticking off with numbers drawn on there, so it looks like a target turret. Well, it's going to be easier to grab onto and adjust. However, the internal mechanics are identical to the sporting scope. So just because it has a big knobby looking target style turret doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually really going to be that much superior than the other one was. So again, it's not a measure of how big and knobby looking the turret is. It's more of a measure of the internal mechanics of it. Was it truly designed that way, or was it a retrofitted sporting optic as a marketing scheme to get you as a long-range guy to fall in love with their product? That's what you need to know. And we'll be talking about that when we get into some of our optics selection here very soon. Okay, there are different units of angular measurement when we're talking about turrets and the adjustments that you're going to be putting onto your scope. If you look at most American hunting scopes and you take the lens cap off, or not the lens cap, but the turret cap off, and you look at that, it might say 1/4 inch value or 1/2 inch at 100 yards. That's not really talking about inches of value. For example, if it says 1/2 inch per click on that turret, that's only at a specific range, because what it really is, it's an angular system of measurement. Think about it in terms of degrees. Let's say you have an angle, okay? You have a big giant triangle, and the angle of the triangle, it's a real skinny one. It's a 1 degree triangle, right? 1 degree at the first foot is going to be like a very small distance, right? Something like maybe, I don't know how far it would be, but it'd be pretty small. If you go out 1,000 miles, that the distance at the base of that triangle, that angular measurement now is going to be quite a large distance, right? Because the further out you go, that even though it's 1 degree, it keeps spreading and spreading the further away you get. So that's the angular system of measurement we're talking about. Now, in rifle optics in America, it is based in the degree system of measurement. And what we have as units of measurement on most sporting optics in the United States is minutes of angle, okay? Now, a lot of people make this too confusing. Basically, a minute of angle is just based on degrees. Every 60th of a degree is a minute. So you have 360 degrees in a circle, okay? So in one circle, there's 360 degrees. If you take half a circle, that's 180 degrees. If you take 1 degree and you zoom in on it, okay, that's a pretty narrow slice of that circle, right? That's a pretty sharp angle. So that's one degree. Now you chop that up into minutes. How many minutes are in an hour? 60, right? So you chop up 1 degree into 60 parts. There, that's a minute of angle. So 1 minute of angle is 1/60th of 1 degree. So that's a degree form of measurement. Very simple. There's another system of angular measurement, and if you've taken trigonometry or you've done any math courses, or if you remember back in high school or college or whatever, there's radians. Very different system of angular measurement than degrees. And basically what a radian is, 1 radian, there's like only 6 and a little bit left over radians in a circle, okay? And what a radian is if you take any given circle, the radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the edge, okay? And you take that distance, the radius distance, and you form it around the outside edge of the circle. So you follow around the outside edge, 1 distance of radius, 1 radian, that's 1 radian, okay? So a radian is basically the distance around the perimeter of that circle that would be equal to the radius. So if you hear about a scope in which the units of measurement are in mils, what mils is short for is milliradians. That means there's 1,000th of a radian. There's basically 1,000 milliradians in every radian. So just like there's 60 minutes of angle per every degree of angle, there is 1,000 milliradians of angle per every radian of angle. So it's just chopping up radians into smaller parts, just like minutes is chopping up degrees into smaller parts. So one's kind of a degree system, one's based on the radian system. And when you hear the the term of mil dot, that's referring to the inside the reticle on a mil dot scope. Each dot is placed 1 milliradian apart from the other dot. Okay. So that's basically an angular unit of measurement. And obviously, if you take a mil dot scope and you look at something very close, that angular distance that we're calling a milliradian is going to be much smaller than if you're looking at something extremely far away, in which case that mil will be covering a lot larger of a distance. You got to remember, and this is crucial that you understand this before you get any farther, is that both systems are angular systems of measurement. They're going to vary with distance, because just like on a triangle, the closer you get to the point, the shorter of a distance that angle has covered, right? And the farther away you get from the point on the triangle, the larger the distance is. So you must know that. Now, so which one is better for long-range shooting, minutes of angle or radians, milliradians? That's kind of a age-old debated thing. I suppose, minutes of angle is very, very popular in the United States, especially in sporting circles, and even in Europe. A lot of the optics, they are still done in minutes of angle. But most professionals in the field who have to use these units of measurement a lot, kind of like the metric system, like in the field of science and engineering, and in military applications like field artillery or determining ranges to targets, they do prefer to use radians. That seems to be the standard. Now, I'm not going to say one way or the other which one is better, because it's a matter of perspective. What you're more familiar with might be the better one, possibly. One word of caution before we get too far is you're going to remember that you're going to want to make sure that the angular system of measurement that's denoted in the hash marks in your scope, you want that to be in the same angular system of measurement as whatever is marked out on your turrets. You don't want to have milliradian turrets and minutes of angle in your reticle, and you don't want to have minutes of angle on your turrets and milliradians in your reticle. That's going to be very confusing trying to convert back and forth. So if you like how the mil dot reticle works out, if you like that spacing, if that's what you're used to, I would strongly recommend, in fact, I would pretty much insist that you make sure that the turrets on your scope are also marked in mils to match your reticle. Now, if a lot of guys do like the minutes of angle and how they happen to look in the scope, as far as your reticle. So if you like how that looks, or if for some reason you already have really awesome detailed logs and charts done in minutes of angle, and you're very used to that system of measurement, you're already kind of ingrained to it, then I would recommend sticking with the minutes of angle and using that in your turrets, but making sure you get a reticle that is your ranging reticle is also marked off in minutes of angle. So you just want them to match. That's the main thing. Either system will work fine. It just so happens if you want to compare the two, 1 minute of angle at 100 yards is going to be a smaller unit of measurement than 1 milliradian at 100 yards. You can fit 3.438 minutes in 1 mil. Okay? So that's basically, that would be like there's 3.6 inches inside a mil at 100 yards, if that's the way it's going to work out. And remember that it's not exactly 1 inch at 100 yards for minutes either, but it's pretty close. So for practical purposes, that's the way to kind of remember it. So if someone was starting from scratch and they're not set in any one way or the other, and they're going to ask me which system of measurement would be superior to the other, I would recommend milliradians, just because it's the world standard and the spacing of it does work out in some ways a little better than others. And so that's just my preference, but if you're a minute of angle guy, that's cool as well. Now, in respect to the turrets on your rifle, most rifle scopes that are equipped with turrets that are marked off in minutes of angle are going to be marked off in units of quarter minute of angle, and it's going to be in fractions, okay? So basically, you're going to have 4 clicks per every minute. That's the standard. So if you want to turn it 2 minutes of angle, that's going to be 8 clicks. So an example of a firing solution would be 6 1/4 minutes of angle to go ahead and adjust your scope for. So you'd adjust to 6, and then you'd do one more click past 6, and that would be 1/4, or 6 3/4, or whatever. So there are going to be fractions involved there. Now, there are some scopes that are also in 1/8 minute clicks, okay? That's where it's 8 clicks per minute. Now, that seems like it would be a pretty good deal because it's a lot more small of a unit of measurement, right? So you're really chopping up into smaller pieces. However, for long and extreme range, there is kind of a disadvantage to having that many clicks per unit, and it's basically going to have to do with how many revolutions, how many units per revolution you're going to have in your scope. And for scopes that are divvied up into 1/8 minute of angle adjustments, you're going to have to turn that thing sometimes a lot to get any significant movement out of your reticle. Now, for certain applications like target shooting, like if you're shooting paper targets or something like that in competition, that's what that's kind of designed for. So 1/8 minute of angle adjustments is fine for target shooting, but I would kind of steer away from that. That's way too fine for most practical applications. When you're indexing your firing solution, you don't want to get lost in your different. You don't want to have to turn that turret 5 or 6 times and try to keep track of where you're at, because that's going to be confusing. The less you have to turn the turret to get farther, the better you're going to be. That's kind of why a lot of your tactical scopes that the military likes to use, like your Unerdal and your M3A and some of these other ones, are going to have like half-minute clicks rather than 1/4, is because it's a bigger unit of measurement. So it's a lot quicker to index, and you're going to be less likely to get lost from having to turn your too many revolutions per however much adjustment you actually get out of it. But for extreme range applications, I would still recommend 1/4. 1/2 minute of angle clicks might be a bit too much for extreme ranges, because a half minute of angle at extreme range is going to be quite a bit. It might be like 5 or 6 inches, at 1,000 yards. So 1/4 value is going to be fine. Now, when you're talking about your milliradians in your other system of measurement there, when you're talking about mils, those optics are almost always divvied up into 1/10 of a mil. So you might have a firing solution calling for like 10.3 mils. So you dial up to the number 10, and then in between 10 and 11, you'd have 10 clicks. 10 evenly spaced clicks in there. And that's one of the reasons I do prefer mils myself, is just because, like the metric system, it's a bit easier to make those corrections like that without having to deal with fractions and things like that. So it's really a matter of preference. If someone was starting brand new, I would point him to mils if they could find a scope that they liked using mils, milliradian adjustments rather than minutes. But if you're a minutes guy, like I said before, that's fine. Either will work fine.